let's check just how good some of our predictions were last summer and do a quick 24-25 season review. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official Draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for this post-season season review episode. As I said, having a look back at what we discussed last summer, now that the season is finished and we can look at everything through the lens of hindsight. So I'm going to have a quick check-in, have a look at my own draft league seasons, which, to be honest, out of the 8 or so years I've been playing draft, possibly up there with the more disappointing seasons. Quick look at how the Premier League table finished up and see if anything stands out from that. Then, as I said, a look back over the pre-season pods from a year ago to see how the tips and some of the comments I made stack up now all is said and done. Now, I'll say here right at the top, if you want your league data saved to look back on in years to come, then sign up at draftfc.co.uk before the game ticks over, and it will all be archived for you. Once the game goes into refresh mode, which will happen any day now, the data is gone and we can't retrieve it. So even if you sign up in a few weeks' time, we won't be able to do anything about it. So if you want your league data saved, then sign up now. You could pay for a monthly and then cancel if you don't want to pay for it through the summer, which is understandable, but it has to be done ASAP. The site refresh is already in full swing, ready for your 2025 draft days. I'll be using and showing some of the league analytics in this pod, so you'll get a brief look at it. And the plans in the pipeline for this summer should see us give members another big overall upgrade heading into this year. Should be really exciting and looking forward to being able to show that off in a month or so's time. Another thing I want to mention right here at the top before you all get bored and click away is that ahead of next season, I am looking for 8 to 10 managers that consider themselves real draft heads who have a good pedigree of winning the leagues they're involved in over multiple seasons in order to form what I'm going to call a Draft FC league that I can shine a spotlight on, including commentary on the draft and then analysing throughout the season. That's the idea anyway. I'm not fully thought it out in my head, but the starting point is assembling the league. I will not be involved in it. I want to be a kind of a just somebody looking down under the microscope. So it won't be against me, but I will kind of oversee the running of it and obviously make sure that there's a draft time that suits everyone, etc. DM us or comment below. I need you to sort of comment your very brief draft CV in terms of how long you've been playing, your kind of record, and if you can comment your league ID from this season, or your team ID rather, so that I can have a look at your team and see how competitive the league's been when assembling that league together. No harm in commenting if you're not sure you're going to be good enough, because I'm not even sure there'll be enough people commenting. So if you're interested remotely, just comment and let me know what your record's like. But without further ado, because I'm thinking this could be a bit of a long episode, bear with it. I think it is important to kind of have a look back and take stock of some of the predictions we had last summer, how the league went, because it will help hopefully get some of the juices flowing in our brains and start to sow seeds as we come to plan for the upcoming season. There won't really be much content, to be honest, for a few weeks after this. So I don't mind rambling a little bit on this one because you can eke this content out for many days and weeks as you wish. Let's get straight into it. So, as I said, let's jump straight into my personal season review, and the two main leagues I sort of participate in. There is my long-standing home league, which has gone on for 8 years now and just finished its 8th year. And then there's a content creator league, which has been going for 3 years now. Just going to start off. So what you currently see on screen is the Draft FC dashboard. So this is the app that you'll see as a signed up member. I've started off by looking at the global ranking. So what this is basically looks at how many teams in your league. So for my home league this season, there were 9 people in it. So it looks at all the other 9-person leagues and ranks your cumulative points total to see how competitive your league is ultimately. So you can see here for 9-person leagues, there were just over 2,000 9-person official FPL draft leagues. And the Shook ones came in 18th this season, which isn't bad. We have come as high as first before, but we're generally pretty well up there. If you have a look on the table here, the Hong Kong FPL Draft Premier League was number 1 with a cumulative 14,557 points, which was, if we go to the Shook ones, in 18th, so we finished on 14,454. So as a league, they were a full 100 points ahead of us. So very good effort, and that's a very I know that's a very competitive multi-league setup there that's got lots of promotions, relegations. So yeah, 18th isn't bad at all. So it was pretty competitive. Another pretty competitive season for the Shook ones. If we have a quick look at the league, and we're a classic scoring league, and came in 4th this year, which was disappointing. Was kind of in the running for first a few weeks ago, but ultimately sort of faded away and fell well short in the end. I was kind of hoping I could maybe sneak into 3rd, but wasn't to be. So 1657 was my points tally, a good 20 points or so away from 3rd. Ultimate champion 1720, so a long way off there in the end, about 70 points off in the end. So yeah, well beaten. If we have a look, we've got a nice new slider here, so we can kind of see how this compares. I'm going to just move it to the running cumulative total and just hone in over the very final few weeks. So let's go from sort of game week 33, game week 34. So I'm the red line, and you can see there 189 points from game week 34 to 38, put me second bottom in the league. So really that's where things started to fall apart. We look at points by position. Overall, not bad. In fact, let's move the slider back because that's just looking from that end. If we look at the season as a whole again, points by position, goalkeeper I was kind of middling there. Defenders did okay. Midfielders I was right in the middle. Just full screen that there. And for forwards, not bad. So it was all fairly mediocre. You couldn't say there was any obvious place where I fell down. If we look at sub versus start points, so this is basically just seeing how many points you waste away on the bench. Again, this has probably been my Achilles heel in seasons past where I haven't done so well. 238 on the bench, if we can compare that to some of my league rivals, 244, 206, 260, 258. So again, not a massive detriment there. The ultimate winner here, KH, did fairly well at limiting the number of points wasted on the bench. And then in terms of how points scored, one thing that I'm always hot on, and usually mention it at some point during the pre-season, is how important the minutes played metric is in terms of your point scoring. It is your bread and butter. You want players who play, and you want players who play more than 60 minutes, because if you regularly miss out on those points, you will not do very well. So if we look at this graph, which this chart is showing how points are scored, and each color represents, as you can see from the bottom, a different metric. So yellow is just from pure minute points. So straight away, you can see how much of the bulk of points come from that. So if I look at myself, just from minutes, 800 points. And I believe that was the most in the league. So that's a good thing. That's a big tick for me in my own book. That tells me that I am picking players that are going to play, which I would hope I do, considering a large part of my working week is predicting Premier League lineups for you all. So I didn't fall down, didn't lose points there, but clearly the players I did pick were just not quite good enough over the course of the season. If we have a look at the other leagues, so the Draft FPL Content League, I finished up in 3rd spot in this league. This is a head-to-head league. In terms of total points, I came second. So the ultimate winner, JW, 1797. I finished on 1738. JC was about 100 points, 100 FPL points off myself. He ultimately finished in second place on head-to-head points. And you can see actually just how close it was because they both finished on identical points head-to-head wise. So both finished on 79. And then I said, faded in not too dissimilar a fashion to the other league about 5-6 weeks out. I was kind of had a chance around game week 32, but lost a couple of key head-to-heads, and that was me out. So finished on 64, so 15 points off in the end. Now, considering how many points I rattled off, you might think there was a bit of bad luck involved. Now, one of the new charts we've already got in there because we know how much people love looking at bad luck or good luck in head-to-head leagues. We've now got a table which is expected head-to-head points. So what this does is every single game week, it will rank all of the game week scores, okay? If I go to, if I go to table view at the top, so this changes all of the charts to table view and go back to expected head-to-head points. What you can see here, for every game week throughout the season, are the expected head-to-head points each manager would get that game week. Let me explain it very briefly. So if you imagine this was a 10-team league, so each week you could get matched up against any one of 9 managers. Now, if you score the most FPL points that week, it doesn't matter who you are matched against for the head-to-head matchup. Your projection is to get all 3 points because it doesn't matter who you're matched against. So your expected head-to-head points for that game week is 3. So, for example, game week 1 there, Matt Broadhead was the highest, 3 points. And if you follow that logic, the other end, if you scored the lowest tally that game week, then your projected points would be 0. Because again, it doesn't matter who you'd be matched up against, you're not winning the matchup. It gets slightly more complicated when allowing for draws, and our algorithm does allow for draws. So if you end up on the same number of points as another manager, that is taken into account. Equally, so if you then go from the top, if you are the second highest scoring manager on a rank basis, then again, you've got an 8 out of 9 chance that you would win. But there is that 1 in 9 chance that you happen to get bad luck, match against the highest scoring manager that week, and you get 0 points. So, for example, in game week 1, James White, his predicted output was 2.67 points on that basis. And if you follow that logic right the way through the season, then you can sort of add it all up and compare it to actually what the final data was. So if we go back to chart view, so if we look at head-to-head points for JW, who won, finished on 79, as did JC. If we look at their expected head-to-head points, JW was expected to finish on 78, so he pretty much did as he was expected to. Got 1 point more than he maybe should have done. I should have come in second, so my overall expected points was just under 74, but I finished on 64. So was sort of hard done by out of a good 10 points or so with bad matchups. JC, the flip side, finished on 79, was projected to get 61. So outperformed their expected head-to-head points by about 16 points. So that's, a massive upswing in luck and good fortune. So, yeah, and overall, did fairly okay. Again, the only thing I would say in this league is I was kind of falling into old bad habits, which was that my bench was far too high. 311 versus 236 and 250 respectively for the other league rivals. Now, one thing we've also got, which I didn't show you on the new league analytics, is imagine if you made the optimal starting 11 decision from game week 1 to game week 38. So you maximized all the points on the bench. So yeah, basically didn't drop any points on the bench. So we click optimal lineups. You'll see the graphs change ever so slightly now. So even if I went with optimal lineup, I would have still been a shade below JW in terms of overall points. In terms of expected head-to-head points, I would have still been a shade under JW still. So didn't really lose out anything there. And again, I think that's a really nice thing to have a look at, because I'm sure some of you will have felt very hard done by, finished up in second spot by just 1 or 2 points, and thinking, oh, if only I'd started so and so in game week 24, that would have been a massive swing, etc., etc. But obviously, every manager in the league can look back and have moments like that. So this equalizes that and gives everyone their optimal lineup throughout the season, and then still projects what their expected head-to-head points would be week to week. So, from an expected points basis, whether it was optimal or not, all around, I was kind of destined to finish second, ended up finishing third, but was never going to win. So definitely some improvements to look back on there. But yeah, that's pretty much my season. So fourth and third respectively, definitely need to improve on that next season. Overall, looking back at my draft day performance, was pretty good. I'm fairly pleased with that. In fact, if I go back to the Shook Ones, my main home league, and go to the draft room, we have the table, and if I go to mine, so Isaac, Odegaard in round 2, based on all the information we had, I thought that was pretty good value. Mbumo, Muniz, Saliba, Gibbs White, Johnson, it was a fairly decent opening 7 rounds. It didn't do poorly there at all. Even got Munoz in round 11. Yeah, Robinson in round 13, who I think I probably dropped quite quickly. But yeah, draft day wasn't too bad. I think it was the same in the other league too. But ultimately, falling short. So yeah, need to do a bit more reflection on that and find out if there are any real sliding doors moments. But it's very difficult over 38 game weeks given the amount of noise that can happen in draft leagues. But yeah, be interested to see if anyone has any learnings that come from the league analytics, looking at your own leagues, and if you've got any huge swings in the expected points versus the final league table. By the way, we've got expected head-to-head points you might have seen when I was scrolling. So even if you're in a classic scoring league, if you wanted to see what a final league table might have looked like in terms of expected head-to-head points, we calculate that as well, because why not? It's just a bit of fun. And for that league, we would have had the same winner. So again, and in fact, for head-to-head, I'd have been way down, 2, 4, 6. I'd have fallen 6th if it was a head-to-head league. So maybe I was quite fortunate to finish 4th. Let's have a quick look at the final league table then. I mean, I'm sure I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm sure you're all aware of how things finished up. This is just the league table as is. What I always like to look at as well is the league table based on the underlying data, expected stats, which looks at all of the expected goals for and against for each match over the season. And similar to what I was just talking about in creating expected head-to-head points for your draft leagues, it does that for Premier League teams. And it's a very good way of benchmarking how well the team's actually performed. So if we move forward, this is now looking at expected points. So Liverpool would still be champions. Arsenal would still be second. If you look at that top 5, it's not too dissimilar. Now, interestingly, Bournemouth are way up there. So on expected points, they finished 9th, but possibly should have finished 6th, according to the data on this site. This is on Opta Analyst, by the way. You might recognise the table. The big one, the most interesting one, and you might not spot it at first glance, is down here. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So in 14th spot sit Nottingham Forest with expected points of 50.1, which is a massive drop from where they finished in 7th. And just to double check, because all of these companies use slightly different data sets. Some collect their own, some use Opta stats. So it's nice to sometimes compare, because there will be subtle differences. If you go to this is Understat. Again, you might recognise the tables for this. And again, Forest way down on their expected points, below United and Spurs. And possibly even more interestingly, again, back to Bournemouth. In this model, Bournemouth were projected to finish 3rd, ahead of City, Newcastle, Chelsea. So, yeah, Bournemouth really hard done by. In fact, I might show you quickly. I know this doesn't look very good. Bournemouth. It's interesting how many of their players underperform. So if we sort their team by XG, Semenyo, XG of just under 15, only scored 11. Evan Nilsson, XG of around 14, only scored 10. Dango, XG of 11, only scored 7. Kluivert, basically, if you look at all those reds, they're all underperformers. Kluivert was the only one who outperformed his XG, and of course, a lot of those were penalties. So if you're looking at non-penalty XG, he's basically bang on what he should have been. So half his goals were penalties. So it's one of those seasons. Brighton had a similar season a few years back under Graham Potter, where just lots of players missed crucial chances, and it looked like they had a really bad year. They were sort of flirting with relegation, but actually the expected stats show that they performed much better than that. And yeah, Bournemouth just had a bit of a cruel swing of bad luck overall. Lots of players underperforming, and overall saw them tumble down the league and miss out on a European spot, which I have to say they probably did deserve in the end. But anyway, yeah, that's the league table. I think the key thing is paying some attention to the expected league table as well as the final league table when appraising teams and players for draft day and for next season. So, particularly Nottingham Forest, what that is showing us is that we could overvalue them if we take their stats at face value. So it's little things like that. And if you've never looked at those tables, it can be a good fun thing to play with. So, unfortunately, Spurs, no matter what table you use, still come out pretty crap. So now I'm going to go through, as I said, some of those pre-season videos. So just going to play them off of YouTube, play a little bit, comment a little bit. Some of them I will spend more time on than others, and I'm going to go through them in the order that they were published last year. So starting with the goalkeeper preview, which came out towards the end of July, 27th of July. And yeah, I mean, most of that video was spent trying to prove to you how generally rubbish they were and not to overvalue leagues. Most average size leagues between 8 and 12, be aggressively late with when you take your first goalkeeper. If you overreach for a goalkeeper and take a goalkeeper, let's say in round 6, by that time it's highly unlikely you will have filled out 3 mids and 3 forwards. If you haven't got all of your forwards and you are taking a goalkeeper, the caliber of forward that you can then pick up in the following round just falls off a cliff. And you'll notice it soon in the draft. I mean, you'll notice the drop-off in forwards after round 2. And then once people start... Yeah, I mean, I was kind of like a bit of a scratch record last summer. And if you remember, I'll see if I show them in a minute, but in some of those videos, I was kind of trying to go through a bit of a mock draft and demonstrate that by... passing up on a striker in round 2 or 3, the number that they then sail by before the draft snakes back to you really can let you down, and they're so crucial. I mean, I'm sure there are many of you listening now, if you didn't heed that advice last year, who potentially passed up on forwards because you liked the look of a midfielder or even a defender in round 2 or 3. Forwards just were not in the waiver pile. The vast majority of us had all 3, if not 2 out of 3 of the forwards that we started with all year long, unless you traded them because, we just didn't really get any gems come along. There were the odd ones week to week, but otherwise, you were pretty much stuck with the lot that you got on draft day. So that was my main thing from the goalkeepers. I mean, if we look at the goalkeeping position, generally, you might have seen when we were just looking at the Draft FC analytics for in fact, let's go back to it. So if we look at points by position, the top scoring manager in terms of goalkeepers got 157 points over the full season. The range, so bottom was 122. So the range from the manager with the best number of points and the worst was 35 points. So less than 1 point per game week is the kind of difference your goalkeeper made. And a lot of that you can kind of make up for in even just how well you rotate them. So again, if I go to optimal lineups, so this would assume that you pick the best goalkeeper every single week. We see that we've now got someone could have got 185 and the worst was 161. So the range, the gap gets even smaller to just 24 points, which if you think there are 9 managers there rotating 2 and obviously sometimes wavering in and out goalkeepers in a 9-team league, a difference of 185 to 161 over a league season is not going to make or break anything at all. So yeah, it's just, do not overvalue the position. I will go over it again in the summer, no doubt at all, and hopefully try and use some of these numbers to demonstrate that. But Pickford was top scoring again with 158. Sells got 150. Then there were about half a dozen average scorers below them. The top 3 keepers all had the most clean sheets. Pickford was top 3 for saves and I think top overall for bonus points. So another good year for Pickford. Leno was a big letdown. You know, we've been a fan. I don't think I pushed Leno quite so much last summer. It was more the summer before. But yeah, Leno had a pretty poor season this year and really underperformed his expected goals on target metric, which is a good way of comparing how good keepers are in terms of whether they let more or less in compared to what an average keeper should let in. So yeah, and then the other big thing, which we kind of formalised a bit more last season, and I probably showed some on the video, were these the goalkeeper pairing table, which we will do again, and that will be part of the pre-season draft package. So just a way of projecting how many points each goalkeeper will make week to week, and then trying to highlight nice juicy pairings. So in that one, we were looking at Everton and United. There's a big which of Pickford and Onana, unsurprisingly, and Pickford and West Ham keeper, whoever that may be. So, which, look, if you went with Pickford plus anyone, you'd have had a fairly decent year because of how good Pickford was. So, yeah, we'll do that again, no doubt. But yeah, that's the goalkeepers. Let's move forward to the defender episode now, which came out just a day later. Yeah, getting a cold sweat remembering how busy I was that week putting these videos out. One of the big things I was harking on about around then was the sort of changing nature of the Premier League as a whole. That was coming off the back of points changes for the way FPL was scoring, which was certainly not going to favour your keepers and defenders, but also just looking at goals going in for the league as a whole. So what was I... Let's see what I had to say.
I think the key is the number of goals being scored. And I think particularly the number of goals being scored with that extra time being added on. So in the 22-23 seasons, that's the one before last, we saw the highest goal tally for over a decade. There were 1,084 goals scored in the Premier League as a whole for the seasons. That's all the clubs' goals added up. 1,084. Last season, we saw 1,246 goals across the season, a 15% increase, and the highest we've seen in the Premier League era. You'd have to go back to the early 60s to find similar goal scoring rates in the top division and obviously clean sheets. The total number of clean sheets over the Premier League season has been, again, similar to the goals scored, has been remarkably consistent over the past decade. Average number, if you were to add up all the clean sheets that every team gets, is around...
Yes, so that was the point I was trying to make, was that we was just seeing a huge amount more goals. I was also speculating that the amount of added time was potentially contributing to that, and obviously as a result, apologies for a bit of a continuity cut there. There was a parcel man at the door. Yeah, what I was trying to get at was that huge amount more goals, and naturally as a result, far less clean sheets, which you can see in that table on the screen now. On that chart on the screen now. So yeah, should we have a look at what that actually then, let's go 1 year further now and see whether that data kind of still holds true. So if we see now the total number of Premier League clean sheets, this was what you just saw on screen, and if we roll that forwards, we can see that actually there was a slight uptick towards the previous mean. So last season there were 157. Sorry, the season before last, there were 157 clean sheets, and this season just gone, that increased to 178. So it's still a long way off the average, which is about 210 if you look at the last decade or more. But, you know, we didn't see the trend continue downwards. So we're potentially finding a new level here of a new mean. So also we saw that this added line graph on top is showing the number of goals that went in added injury time after 90 minutes, which again, slight downtick, which is consistent with the uptick in clean sheets. And obviously, if we look at the goals, that was the massive upswing season before last, and we had the same thing as with the clean sheet. So 1,115 goals is still more than any of those other seasons for 50 years or so, but it is a big dip from the season before. So it could be that season was an anomaly. It could be that this is still another indicator that we're kind of finding a new mean that's kind of around this level here. 2 seasons for the change isn't enough to really infer a pattern. The end of next year, we will have a far better idea. So we'll keep all these graphs and I will add to them, and we'll look at these again this time next year and see where we're looking. Obviously, if these now go back down more to this kind of level, then we're potentially looking at more of an anomaly, and there's loads of reasons why that might be. It can be just general styles of play across the league, etc. But yeah, not enough data yet, but it's still interesting to note that overall clean sheets are down, goals are up, and we need to value defenders accordingly. But a big part of that episode, we go back, was looking at individual players. So let's have a look at some of the players that we mentioned in that episode. And the first one, I believe, was big man a la Madrid, Trent Alexander-Arnold. So let's
Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, I think if premium defenders remain, then Alexander-Arnold is still at the top of the list. Now, he may be the only one that occupies that niche. From a purely footballing perspective, there isn't really another player with his ability playing as a defender in the league. His delivery from both open play and set pieces, his power, the position he...
Yeah. We all know what Trent can do. So yeah, I mean, I would give this a bit of a tick. He finished as the second overall defender. He was 21st in the overall Draft FC rankings, and all said and done, he finished 26th overall. 148 points, was 5.6 per 90, 3 goals, 7 assists, 12 clean sheets. His absence from the Premier League now that he's moved to Madrid really does blow the defender market wide open and should force more managers into better draft day tactics, whether they like it or not, because I'm not sure the likes of the next player we're going to talk about, Bardiol, are going to have quite the same allure in the opening sort of 2 or 3 rounds, because with Alexander-Arnold, I think there was always that notion of his ceiling being so incredibly high, above 200 points, that made him still pretty attractive to lots of draft managers. So yeah, that brings us on to the next player we had in the list was Vardiol. Let's have a listen to what
campaign with huge head-to-head smashing scores. Now, I just returned from a holiday in Croatia, and one of the final things I saw as I was in the taxi heading to the airport was a huge billboard for Usko beer, which is kind of the main beer that you get out there, with Vardiol stood there, smiling away, holding a pint, which I thought, I have to take that as a sign. I was already quite high on him, but yeah.
If this is the first video you're watching on Draft SC, I promise you the level of analysis and intel is generally better than that.
Yeah, that was just a nice little message from the Croatian gods that we need to value him appropriately this season. At the time of recording this, I've got him sitting around 37th overall. I think if you manage to get him as your number 1 defender, you can be fairly pleased with yourself. I think he'll continue to start the majority of games for City. I'm expecting City's clean sheet potential to nudge up slightly. If any team can do it, I think City can. And he was getting plenty of shots away, averaging more than a shot a game, which for a defender is pretty good going.
Yeah, so obviously Vardiol finished as the number 1 defender overall and was the 20th player overall, just ahead of Trent, 153 points. His per 90 stats weren't as good, 4.2 points per 90, but he did start 36 games, which is probably where he edged out Trent in the end. Trent obviously missed a good handful towards the end and probably would have overtaken him. But yeah, 36 starts is as good as you'll ever see from a Manchester City defender. Lots of talk about them in the market for a left back. It seems like they're on the verge or left wing back, on the verge of signing Ryan Aït-Nouri. So how that shapes the team and what that does to Vardiol, we will have to see. Gut knee-jerk instant reaction is that it doesn't improve his ability as a draft asset. But in terms of shouting him out in pre-season again, I'll give that one a tick. Nice spelling of Vardiol there. The next couple we had were, and I won't necessarily play the video for these, we had Maatsen for Aston Villa, who really didn't nail down that left-back spot as much as I thought he would. So that is a miss. His per 90 stats weren't too bad, 4.6 points per 90, but just 10 starts meant there were way more misses than there were hits. And then the other one that I was fairly high on at that time was Jan van Hekke, due to what I thought could have been a nice positional change for him in Hurtzler's system, which we did not see ultimately. Still think Van Hekke was one of Brighton's best players, but yeah, by no means a standout, and definitely a miss as well. Finishes the 41st defender overall, just 87 points, which ultimately it was just a poor defensive season from Brighton, which I think they will improve on next season. But again, that's chat for another day. So let's move forward to the midfielder episode, which followed largely the same format. One thing perhaps I will show quickly was that draft board scenario, which I mentioned before, which I know a lot of you will possibly recall from last season, but let's find it in the video. Yeah, here it was. So let's play that.
Right. What I think I'll do for those on the audio, which will probably work just as well, is I will include a link to just a still image of the final draft board that I create here, and then you can just follow along as I'm talking through it now. So I'll quickly skip through what would be the first round here. So the opening round, we had a forward picked in the very first overall position, a string of mids, another forward by player 7, and then the player on the turn in pick 8 chose a mid and a forward. Let's roll on round 2. So we roll on round 2, and the next 2 players went to an alternate position. So we've now got 3 players at the bottom who've got 1 forward and 1 mid from the opening 2 rounds. The 3 players that drafted first have also done the same thing. So they've all gone a forward, a mid, mid-forward, mid-forward. Players 4 and 5 both picked up a midfielder again in the second round. So they're both sitting on 2 midfielders. Okay. Now, player 1 has gone for another midfielder at the top of the third round on the turn. Now, considering the value, and it probably doesn't take a huge amount of guesswork to guess who that forward would represent. Given the value in that forward, I think going for 2 decent mids at this point is absolutely reasonable given their situation in the draft. If we roll on round 3 a little bit more, and player 2 went for a mid, player 3 picked up a second forward. So player 3 is now on 1 mid, 2 forwards. 4 and 5, neither of them have got a forward yet. Player 4 decides to go straight in for a forward. Now, at this point in the draft, if we just pause here, we've had 2, 4, 6, we've had 8 forwards. So 8 of the top forwards are gone. If you look at your own draft rankings now, the top 8 forwards, cross those off the list and imagine you're player number 5. It's not a great spot to be in. At this point in the draft, we've had 8, 16, 20 picks. Now, if you remember from my defender episode, this is around the point that I had Alexander-Arnold in my overall rankings. So if you were blindly following the rankings, and let's just assume that for a second, Manager 5 does do that, he goes and picks a defender. So as I said, no, I'm not going to pretend who that is or isn't. Let's call that Alexander-Arnold. So player 5 now has 2 mids and a defender. As we roll on further, we can see that the bottom 2 players have both each now picked up another forward. So player 8 on the turn went mid-forward. So player 8 going up into the 4th round now has 2 mids and 2 forwards, which to my mind is very well balanced. So if we roll it on another time, player 7 has the same, 2 mids and 2 forwards. As we're now coming up to player 5 again, so we're now round 4, and they've got 2 mids and a defender. Now, you're probably looking at the board. In the time it's taken for the turns to turn around, you've got an eyed up some of how the other teams are shaping up. You've looked at all the forwards that are sitting in their teams, along with some decent midfielders. And obviously, you're going to be happy with your midfield and probably happy with Trent. You're going to be starting to really panic about the forward situation. So as I highlight here, player 5 is now pretty much forced to pick up the 11th best forward. And that player, has to be his top forward for the season. That's his forward.
Yeah, so, and if we kind of reflect on that example with the eye of hindsight, in this scenario, the 11th best forward was either Evan Nilsson or Vardy on 126 points. A corresponding midfielder on 126 points was Thomas Souček, for example, and Souček was the 30th best midfielder. So it just shows you the disparity the number of good midfielders. There were 30 midfielders that scored more than 126 points. Just 10 forwards outscored 126 points. So that is just summing up the positional scarcity, which I hammer every season. As I said, we'll hammer again this summer, because it is so important given the lack of good forward options. Had they picked a forward in round 3, where I said they'd have had the 9th best forward, which for this season was Strand Larsen, who got 145 points. So big change there, which is more or less the same number of points that Trent Alexander-Arnold got, but the defenders are just nowhere near as valuable. Anyway, let's have a look at some of the player picks that we talked about in this episode. So the first one that I talked about was Cole Palmer. Go through a few players and their individual rankings and some of my thinking behind them. I'm going to go through 5, as I did with the defenders, starting with the main man who mentioned at the top of the episode, Cole Palmer. Currently, I've got him in 4th, which, as I said, is kind of where a lot of the other numbers are pointing to. Both.
Yeah, and now obviously a lot of managers who play the conventional game more than the draft game will hear Palmer and think what a disappointment he was. Say I had him 4th overall in the Draft FC ranks at that time, and he finished up in 3rd overall. So that's a successful draft pick if that was you picking him in 3rd or 4th. So no complaints there. The next player we had on the list, slightly differing fortune, and a Draft SC favourite, or certainly was Anthony Gordon.
Draft SC favourite. If you follow us on X, if you don't, I encourage you to go over there at draft_FC. You'll know that this time last year we were really high on Anthony Gordon and pretty much sung his praises every time he touched the ball, got an assist, got a goal. Double-digit goals and assists last year, which is phenomenal, considering a lot of people were saying he was not worth the money that Newcastle paid for him. I put Newcastle talisman with a question mark here because you could argue it's Isak. Not entirely sure he's quite talisman status yet, but he could well cement that this season. And in our expected points model, he is another top 20 player for the season. So I think if you're...
An expected points model that we have since updated, by the way.
Getting him somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd round, again, I don't think you're going too far wrong. Next is Christopher Nkunku, who...
hang on, before we go on to Nkunku, that's definitely a miss for Gordon. Probably one of the misses of the season from me. I had him 13th overall, wound up as the 32nd midfielder, just 124 points, 6 goals and 6 assists. Played a good number of minutes, 2,400 minutes. It was on 4.6 points per 90, which is good. About a goal involvement, 1 in 2 full games he played. So okay numbers, but just not good enough for a 2nd round draft pick, and means he dropped his tally versus the season before by around a 3rd. Why was this? Combination, really. Poor early season form, the emergence of Barnes later on, who managed to better Gordon's total with 130 points in far less minutes. Lots of factors, but essentially not playing and just not banging them in like he was the season before. So difficult one. And I know he was someone that was on the trade block for lots of managers. But let's maybe go on to another myth.
There's been a lot of chat about Nkunku this summer, and for good reason, I think. One of the things I would say as a slight cautionary note is that often with Draft FPL, there is a huge amount of bleed over from the content from the normal FPL game. What we always have to bear in mind is that for the normal FPL game, all of the chat really is around pricing. And so this summer, the perception is that Nkunku could be a bit of a bargain. So there is a lot of chat about him. If Nkunku had come into FPL priced at 9 or 10 million, nobody would be talking about him. So just bear that in mind as to why it might seem like there's a lot of noise there. But I think the reason there is a lot of noise there is because he's still a bit of an unknown. The ceiling is incredibly high, but I would say the floor is quite low.
The floor was very low. Just 9 starts all season long is really all you need to know. You say he did okay with his sort of output on a points per minute basis, but 9 starts is not a sustainable draft pick. Next one, far more sustainable, was Dominic Szoboszlai. Let's hear what we had to say about him.
At 51, there was a big fall off last season in terms of his underlying expected stats compared to the previous seasons at Leipzig, which, is not totally unforgivable for him. He's coming into what we all say is a bigger and better league, a very big club in Liverpool. But I'd say 3 goals and 4 assists was disappointing for him last year, and he had plenty of opportunity to do more. I think in the new system under Slot, he's definitely got the potential to prosper as just an out-and-out number 10.
Yeah, which we saw a decent number, decent amount of. Remains to be seen where he actually plays next season, so he could be a difficult player to value. But we had him at 51, finished 35th overall, 143 points, just over 5 points per 90. Pretty much doubled his attacking output from the previous season.
Very good indeed. And then we finish off with another Draft FC favourite. You know who's coming.
Kevin Charder here, and he is in at 64 currently in my rankings. Obviously, last season was ruined by injury. Still managed to get a couple of goals and a couple of assists in just 300 minutes, which actually puts his numbers very high on a per 90 basis, but just not enough sample size. I'm fully expecting Tony to depart this summer. Their new centre-forward signing, Thiago, unfortunately picked up a knee injury in pre-season. So with both of those not being around, should give him plenty of opportunities to impress early on, and I think we should.
Yeah, and he did. So I put this as a tick. I mean, I was really hyping him at 64th overall. He finished 25th overall. So you could argue I didn't hype him enough, but was quite boom or bust is probably the main downside. He obviously got a hat-trick against Leicester in game week 13 for 23 points. So he had he's not someone who would tick over with points and win you head-to-head matchups most weeks. It was really, say, boom or bust. But you all know I'm a massive fan. And we'll have to see where Brentford are in a couple of months' time from the manager point of view, personnel on the pitch. It could be another one who's quite difficult to judge. But depending on the outgoings, someone who has to make a bit of a step up and become the main man potentially next season. So we shall see. We shall see. Next, we go to the forward preview. We're into the 1st of August 2024 now. Again, similar idea. I talked about a couple of the more premium ones earlier on in this video. Ollie Watkins was the first one. I had him as my second forward in the Draft FC rankings, and he finished as the third forward overall. So I would give that a fairly good tick. But I'll say I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much for saying that Ollie Watkins was going to have a good season. The other one was Mateta. There was probably a little bit more risk attached to Mateta because he did overperform a lot versus his underlying stats. I had him as the 8th forward in my Draft FC rankings in that moment, and he finished overall as the 7th forward. So again, I would call that a successful pick. As we moved into the other more controversial ones, Nico Jackson was the first one. Let's have a listen there. The first one I'm going to talk about is Nico Jackson for Chelsea. He's currently in at 17 in my overall rankings, and at number 7, just ranking the forward players. Rather surprisingly to me, his total XG last season was around 20, which was second only to Erling Haaland. Obviously, there was some underperformance of his expected stats. Not just. Second half of the season really let him down. Up to game week 19, he was on 9 goals and 4 assists. From game week 20 onwards, he added just 1 goal and 2 assists, missed a few games through injury and suspension, which obviously didn't help his cause. Such is the fall off for strikers. He was still the 16th best overall, but was on track to be far better than that. But definitely has to go down ultimately as a big miss. The next one was Jamie Vardy, who I had, as you can see on here, Draft FC ranked 50th overall, was my 18th in the forward rankings. Ultimately finished in 12th, so we'll give that a tick. 9 goals and 5 assists, rounded off his final season for Leicester. The more incredible stat for Vardy is that he started 35 league games. And then we had Chris Wood, who, not really sure, I guess this has to be a massive downgrade. I had him as my 19th forward, 57th overall. Didn't even think he'd start the majority of games and ended up, one of the biggest misses of the season. I don't need to tell you how well he did. Finished as the second forward overall, 200 FPL points, 20 goals and 3 assists. Mark my words, he will not improve on that next season. So, it will no doubt be someone that is getting overvalued in other leagues. But, definitely a big miss. And then the last one who I won't talk about was Deniz Undav, who went and joined Stuttgart. So, can't really comment on him. The next couple of videos were on sort of underrated and overrated players. So, I'll try and rattle through these quite quickly because I'm getting sick of the sound of my own voice from last year. So, starting off with the hidden gems, so the players I felt were underrated. The first one that we talked about in this episode was Rodrigo Muniz, and here I was showing his draft map about how sporadic it was. I had Muniz as a 36th overall in my overall rankings. I was fairly certain that he would be the nailed-on striker for Fulham this year, which he started the first few games. I think he played, started the first 3, got 0 goals. The problem was then Raul Jimenez came in and scored in 3 games on the bounce and basically just grabbed hold of the starting spot from that moment onwards. He finished as the 21st forward overall, which actually, if you're in larger draft leagues, is not too shabby, and he actually got some useful points off the bench. If you look at him on a per 90 basis, 8.3 points per 90, 8 goals and 1 assist from just 943 minutes. So it's a good output there, but yeah, just couldn't nail down the minutes. So I'm going to have to put Muniz down as a miss. The second one was I'm not really sure how we rank him here, was Johan Visser. Let's find out what we had to say here.
Overlooked and an extremely solid forward number 2. 0.53 non-penalty expected goal involvement at 90 last season, which is just a smidge below what Muniz was putting up. And he managed 12 goals and 4 assists in FPL for the campaign. Potentially a very exciting attacking trio Brentford could line up with this season. Obviously, new man Igor Thiago's been injured, so he's going to have to sit back for a while. I'm also assuming Tony leaves, but of course he could still be there. But even if Tony does leave, that would leave them with Visser, Brian Mbumo, and Kevin Schade, who's very much on my hot list this season. I think the three of them could pose a really frightening three-pronged attack for many opponents in the Premier League.
That is probably my best take from last summer. Those three were arguably a top 3 or 4 attacking trio in the league. I mean, they were, I didn't look at the final stats. I think they were the only team that ended up with 3 players on 10 or more Premier League goals, which is pretty remarkable in itself, when some teams struggle to even get one. So yeah, the 3 of them were excellent. And I say it's just going to be difficult now to judge what that looks like when 1 or even 2 of them could be on their way to a different club. Now, you see on screen, I've put Visser down as a hit and a miss. He is a hit because ultimately I was putting him on the hidden gem underrated list. But I've also put him down as a miss because even I was not hyping him as much as he should have been. I mean, I had him as 45th overall, and he was my 17th forward, I believe, and ended up as the 4th highest scoring forward in the game. 185 points, 34 starts, 18 goals and 6 assists. So just under 6 points per 90 for an expected goal involvement tally of around 21. Phenomenal season. Yeah, Brentford heading into a pretty tumultuous summer. So who knows? I'd love to be talking about Visser and his potential to get into the Spurs team in a month or 2, but doesn't sound very likely at the moment. The next one I've also put down in a similar vein as a hit and a miss.
Now, we've seen a fair bit of him in pre-season, which bodes well in what have generally been quite attacking lineups compared to some of the 11s that we saw at the back end of last season, as we're now seeing 3 attackers behind the centre forward with a double pivot behind. And so far, we've seen Madeki mainly featuring off the right-hand side. The main issue here is that Palmer will almost certainly take that spot once he's back involved. Boston Nkunku still isn't 100% fit. Sterling, to me, I don't think has a long-term future in the Chelsea 11. So I think Madeki will see plenty enough of the pitch to be able to make an impact and stake a claim to a starting spot regularly. Of course, Palmer could move into number 10, which would vacate that spot on the right. Non-penalty expected goal involvements per 90 last year.
Yeah, so again, I've put Madeke down as a hit and a miss. I had him as 77th overall. He was going around 95th overall. He finished as the 35th best mid, 120 points, just over 2,000 minutes. 5.3 points per 90 is solid, 7 goals, 5 assists. Definitely a step up from what he showed towards the back end of the season. I think with him, some of the working out in terms of, we maybe got to the right answer, but the working out wasn't quite correct in terms of how Chelsea would line up and where Palmer would fit in, as you just heard there from what I was speculating a year ago. I was maybe expecting a little bit more, but perhaps he did as good as we probably could have expected, but not a clear hidden gem in that sense. One we can be much more clearer on in terms of the evaluation is Lucas Paqueta, who you all know I was banging on about as being quite underrated. I had him as 69th in the overall Draft FC rankings. He managed just 80 points from 27 starts, averaging around 3 points per 90. Clearly, off the field factors took their toll, and we even saw him break down in tears towards the back end of the season when he got a yellow card against Spurs, which was a bit sad and a bit weird to see. So that match-fixing investigation very much drags on, possibly making a vast underperformance of his XG fairly obvious in hindsight, but also suffering from the general poor form of West Ham. So not one I will be talking about this pre-season, I promise you, but I'll be the first one back on the bandwagon if he scores in game week 1. The final one is Ilanga, who I've put a big tick next to. Now, I had him sort of bundled together with Hudson-Odoi, and I'll try and find the key bit of my spiel, which I think really nails it.
Expected goal avoidance per 90 was 0.3, scored 8 and assisted 2. Elanga, his non-penalty expected goal avoidance per 90 was 0.51, which puts him up in the camp with the likes of Vissa and Muniz that we spoke about a minute ago. He got 5 goals and 9 assists for that. Towards the end of last year, Hudson-Odoi became a nailed-on starter for Forest, and for some reason, Elanga was not 100% nailed. There were games he was starting from the bench, and this was all off the back of the good numbers that he posted up towards the beginning and middle of the season. Now, in this preseason, both have been starting either side of Morgan Gibbs-White in the number 10 position behind their number 9. We've also seen them sign Jota Silva in the last few days, which slightly adds to the headache because he's another winger, can play on the left but can also play on the right. Now, obviously, unfortunately, I don't get paid millions of pounds a year to manage a Premier League football team. But everything my eyes see and everything the numbers tell me suggests that Elanga should be one of the players that is one of the first names on the team sheet and one of the players they should be building their team around. But it doesn't quite feel that that's the case. If you could tell me now that Elanga is going to play 2,500 minutes next year and he's going to start the majority of games, I would have him 10 places higher, maybe even 20 places higher on the board.
Elanga played 2,496 minutes and started 31 games.
Leave it Hudson-Odoi exactly where he is. But simply for the reason I can't guarantee he plays that much, that's why I have him just slightly below Hudson-Odoi. So really the hidden gem pick here for me is Elanga, not Hudson-Odoi, but I think Hudson-Odoi still has pretty good value up there in the draft anyway. But let's wait and see what the rest of pre-season looks like. Let's hear what the press conferences sound like, whether they sign.
Yeah, so fairly happy with that prediction. So Elanga finished on 153 points, averaging 5.5 points per 90, 6 goals and 11 assists. Definitely a big cog in that Nottingham Forest team. And definitely a good one to have picked up in the later rounds if you did hang on to him on draft day. So yeah, definitely a tick for that one. Finally then, we had the opposite end, and some of the players I was thinking were fairly overrated. Now, I did explain in the video what I was actually using to sort of benchmark this against is the average draft rankings that were trickling into our data. So I was looking at where these guys were going on the kind of draft boards throughout the world, and looking at ones that I felt generally were going far too high up the board. So some of these may seem obvious, and even at the time may have seemed a bit obvious in hindsight, but clearly managers around the world were still taking them fairly high up. So that's why they ended up in this category. The first one that we mentioned was Calafiori. Let's have a look there.
Ricardo Calafiori for Arsenal. His current average draft position is 56. Now, for context, in my Draft FC rankings, he is currently the 39th defender I have ranked. That obviously doesn't tell you where he falls, but that will vary depending on your league size. He's currently the 39th defender in my rankings. Definitely some classic new signing hype here, and he's not the last one that we will encounter in this episode that's got a bit of that. So new team, new league, new tactics. He can play in multiple positions, very versatile. That has pros, but it also has cons. If you're a top...
So I think that was all fairly accurate. Now, he obviously did suffer with injuries. As I said there, I had him as my 39th defender. He finished as the 95th defender, just 39 points from 11 starts, 3.6 points per 90. So fair to him, a lot of injuries, which would have dented the number of minutes and the number of starts that he got. But that sort of that context of, new league, new team, new tactics, someone who doesn't have a defined out-and-out starting position is a player that, unless it's Florian Wirtz, maybe someone we want to stray away from. But yeah, definitely one who was being far too overrated on draft day there. The next one was, again, will seem very obvious in hindsight.
He sits midfielder in my ranking. So that's, think of all the forwards, defenders, handful of goalkeepers that are going above him on my overall ranking. Still not really sure where he fits into the Man United starting level. The most obvious position for me that he would play is the spot that Bruno Fernandes occupies. And there is absolutely no chance that Bruno Fernandes is going to get replaced by Mason Mount.
Yeah, now obviously at this time we were talking about Man United under Erik ten Hag. I think what I just said there from a year ago kind of still holds true today. Arguably as that sort of more forward 8 or 10 position that of which there are 2 in Amorim's system, possibly favours him more than what he was doing under Ten Hag, but I still don't think he's going to be a regular starter for United moving forward. So I had him as the 66th midfielder overall. He finished as the 186th midfielder overall. Just 8 starts, 25 points, just didn't really feature. Next was Ruben Diaz. Let's see what I said here.
Current average draft pick overall is 51, I currently have him as my 18th defender. So we're not looking at as big a gulf between valuations for this one. And this is really where I think it's about the weighting of positions. Anyone that's seen any of my previous episodes will know how much I am advocating for you guys to favour the forwards early on. And when I say early on, I'm still talking as high as pick 51, where Ruben Diaz is going. So he's currently going as the 14th defender, which I said is not massively above where I've got him as the 18th defender. It's just how our overall rankings would look and where all the defenders are currently sat in my ranks. If we just look at him last season, 88 FPL points from 28 starts means he was basically a below average defender. Absolutely nothing to shout about. 0 Premier League goal involvements over the last 2 seasons. So he's not a Gabriel, a Van Dijk, or any of these guys that's nutting them in from corners every other week. He's really not threatening anything whatsoever apart from getting the occasional clean sheets. As we covered in the defender episode, which I would encourage you to go and...
Yeah, so compared to those numbers, this season he got 90 points from 25 starts, 0 goal involvements. So he was just a fairly bog standard defender. In fact, he finished 37th overall from the defenders, 3.6 points per 90. Just nothing really to hype about, and really arguably could fall off draft boards altogether this summer. Next was Joshua Zirkzee. What do we say here?
Just my list of forwards. I've got him as the number 23 striker in the game. Now, obviously, the injury to Højlund may nudge him up 1 or 2 spots because it just improves his chances slightly of playing game week 1, hitting the ground running and being able to stake a claim to the starting spot for the rest of the season. I don't see it. Overall, it's just not a transfer that fills me with any form of excitement. He's coming off the back of a couple of decent seasons in Serie A for Bologna. 53 appearances over the 2 seasons, an XG total of just over 12, and he scored 14 in that time, also got 6 assists. So 20 goal involvements over 2 seasons in 53 appearances is just a pretty regular stock mid-table forward output that I would expect to find in any of the top leagues in Europe. It's obviously got some physical attributes that you will see as soon as you...
Yeah, so again, you could probably cut and paste that into a summer pod this season. He was my forward 23, finished as a 25th forward, 64 points, 14 starts, just 3 goals and 2 assists, about 4 points per 90 is okay. Now, if you had him floating around as a third forward, you could have done far worse than that. But yeah, considering his average draft position at that time was 47th overall, he was absolutely nowhere near that. And the final one was Fabian Schär. Let's have a quick listen there.
Are for Newcastle. So actually, the 5 players we're talking about today, if you just look at them, all from pretty highly regarded clubs and players that a lot of you will have in high regard. And that's not to say I don't. I've got Fabian Schär as my 15th defender overall, so pretty good spot there. If we were talking about an 18 league, he would be a defender number 2 for me, depending on my position. But again, it's just people overvaluing defenders as a cohort as a whole. So his current average draft pick is 63, coming off a good year, 4 Premier League goals last year. Only Romero got more than that with 5. However, the underlying stats did not really support that kind of output. His XG was only 2.7. And teammate Dan Burn, just for comparison, had an XG of 3.4, but just didn't manage to convert the chances like Schär did. The obvious upsides to Schär is if you like the Newcastle defence, he's probably the most nailed on defender.
Yeah, so I've put this down as a miss. I think overall my evaluation of him was pretty spot on, but in the context of this episode, I was putting him as an overrated player. So I had in there, you can see, as my 15th defender overall, and he wound up as the 15th defender overall. So exactly where I kind of thought he would finish. 118 points, 33 starts, nearly 3,000 minutes. And again, got 4 goals and also a couple of assists on top of 11 clean sheets. So 3.6 points per 90, not spectacular, but yeah, I mean, overall, it was another pretty decent season from Schär, and he particularly picked up towards the back end of the season. So I've put that down as a miss because, yeah, probably wasn't being too overrated ultimately on draft day. So that'll do for this episode. I don't think this episode is going to win any major awards, I have to say, but I did feel like just feel kind of obliged to try and draw a line under things for the season. And I think it's nice to look back as well because when I'm making those kind of predictions back in the summer, they quickly get forgotten about, and 38 game weeks later, it's easy to forget where our heads were at last year. So it was good just to check in. I'd say on the whole, definitely more hits than misses, which is good. Definitely some learning to be had there in terms of where the hits and the misses were. But let me know if you had any. Obviously, I've got no way of backing up. Let me know if you guys had any sort of major hits or misses based on your preseason predictions. Any of the big performers that you were actually really high on, or anyone that you were really high on that you took high on draft day who absolutely bombed out, aside from the obvious ones like Foden and that. Were there any that you were really hot on that just did not come through for you? Comment them below. So, as I said at the top, that will be it for a few weeks now. I will go and put my head down and start getting into 25-26 prep. There will be no doubt a flurry of content from all angles next week when the Premier League fixtures get announced. But at this stage, it's still too early for me to really start making any major plans based on that. So don't expect a video from Draft FC for that. But hope you're all enjoying the summer. Hopefully this can help you round off your mind and where your head's been at for Draft FPL 24-25. If you haven't already, let me know in the comments on the previous video was before Game Week 38. So if you managed any nice last minute victories that got you the league wins in Game Week 38, then comment below and share your success with the group. It's always nice to hear that. Another reminder, sign up draftfc.co.uk if you want to archive your league data. And remember, if you think you might have what it takes to have a bit of a spotlight shone on you and your draft day tactics and ultimately your week-to-week draft work, then comment or DM me as well, and I'll try and get something going into early August for that. Okay, which will soon come around. So yeah, enjoy your summers, and until next time, stay shook.